Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. So, you folks know how this works. You send us stuff that you're reading, and then we kind of pick it apart and share some insights.
Exactly. We see what we can learn from it and try to give you the best takeaways.
Right on. And today, we were looking at some newsletters, the Write Well newsletter,
Yeah, this looks pretty interesting. A lot of good advice for writers.
and it's by Angela Hunt.
Angela Hunt, wow, she has a lot of experience.
Over 165 books.
Seriously, that's a ton. So she must have picked up a thing or two along the way, I'd imagine.
Yeah. A few tricks of the trade. So yeah, if you're just starting out or if you've, been writing for a while, this deep dive is for you. We're going to see what we can learn from this Write Well newsletter by Angela Hunt, veteran writer.
Sounds good to me. Let's dive in.
All right. Let's start with one of the features we saw in the newsletter. Word of the week.
Okay, yeah, it looks like we have a couple of examples here.
Copious and rarefy.
Ah.
So copious, tell us about that one. What does that mean? What's the background there?
So copious, Hunt points out, means, having a large quantity of something. Like, you might have copious notes.
Okay. So why not just say many notes?
Well, she actually points out that it's about a richer meaning. Like, copious has a Latin root. It basically means abundance.
Abundance. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and she mentions cornucopia, like that horn overflowing with fruits and vegetables.
Right.
So copious kind of gives you that same idea, right? Overflowing, more than just many.
I see. So it kind of paints a picture in the reader's mind.
Exactly. More visual, more impact.
Okay. I like that. Now, what about rarefy? What's that all about?
Well, when I first saw this, I thought it meant to make something rare.
Yeah, me too.
But turns out it's a little different.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Rarefy actually means to make something less dense or less solid.
Interesting.
Yeah, and she points out this really cool thing about the suffix hemify.
Hifify, okay.
It comes from Latin fessere, which means to make.
To make. So like clarify,
Yeah.
justify.
Exactly. And there are so many others, like vilify, to make someone a villain, ratify, deify, and so on.
I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah, and Hunt uses this to kind of connect all these seemingly different words together.
Wow. So this is fascinating to me because, as a writer, you're always looking for the right word, right? And so how can understanding the root of the word, the etymology, actually help?
That's a great question. Think about it this way. If you just have like a big list of words, they seem random.
Yeah.
But when you start to understand where they came from, the roots, the connections.
Right. It's like uncovering this hidden structure. Yeah.
Yeah. It gives you a deeper understanding. You can choose the perfect word, not just a similar word, like knowing the nuances, the connotations.
Okay. So you're not just expanding your vocabulary. You're expanding your understanding of language itself.
You got it. It's powerful stuff.
All right. Now, let's move on to something that's, super important for writers, and that is copyright.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to get in trouble.
Exactly. And Hunt has some really clear advice about this. So the big question for many writers is, can you actually copyright an idea?
That's the million-dollar question. And Hunt's answer is pretty clear. Copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself.
So how does that actually work in practice?
Okay, so she uses this great example. Imagine someone writes down 2 star-crossed lovers and slaps a copyright symbol on it.
Okay. Sounds pretty basic.
Right. But what they're really copywriting are those exact words. You, as another writer, could take that same idea, the star-crossed lovers, and write a whole different story.
So it's the unique way I tell that story.
Exactly. Your characters, plot, dialogue, everything that makes it your own.
She even jokes about it, right? Like, hopefully your version of Star-Crossed Lovers is going to be different from Romeo and Juliet.
Or West Side Story. Yeah, she keeps it light, but the point is clear. It's about your individual creative expression.
So my unique spin on the idea, that's what's protected.
Precisely. Now, she also gives some examples of things that generally can't be copyrighted.
Okay, what are those?
Things like names, titles, short phrases.
Oh, interesting. So I can't just copyright my character's name.
Not usually, no. Also, ideas themselves, methods, facts, systems, those are generally not eligible for copyright.
So it's got to be like the whole creative package.
Yeah, the specific way you use those elements, like Hunt mentions A Wrinkle in Time as an example.
A classic.
Right, and that specific creative expression of a heroic journey, that's what's protected by copyright.
All right, that makes sense. Now, what about AI? Everyone's talking about AI these days.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other layer, right? And Hunt actually addresses the copyright implications of AI-generated content.
Really? So what's the deal with that?
So the U.S. Copyright Office has made it clear that if AI is the sole creator, like if you just take its output and do nothing else,
Okay.
that can't be copyrighted. But if you actually work with the AI content, edit it, revise it, really put your own spin on it.
Make it your own.
Exactly. Then you can copyright it.
Yeah.
Because it's your creative input that makes it unique.
So the key is that human touch, that creative transformation.
That's what they're looking for, your individual spark.
All right. That's pretty clear guidance for folks who are using AI. Now let's move to something a little bit more abstract, but still incredibly important for writing. Imagination.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the newsletters had a really interesting quote about imagination from Albert Einstein.
Okay, what did Einstein have to say about writing?
Well, the quote was, "The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination."
That's a good one.
Right. And Hunt actually connects this to, believe it or not, the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Wow. Okay, that's a big leap.
Yeah. But she references the 9/11 Commission report, which concluded that part of our national failure was a lack of imagination. Like, we couldn't imagine that such an attack could happen.
I see. So imagination isn't just about, like, making up stories. It's about seeing possibilities, good or bad.
Exactly. And Hunt applies this to writing in a really cool way. She talks about using imagination in both nonfiction and fiction.
Okay, I'm curious. How does she apply imagination to something like, a research paper?
Well, she says even in nonfiction, you have to imagine your reader. Who are they? What do they need? What are they looking for?
Oh, that makes sense. So put yourself in their shoes.
Right. And by doing that, you can write something that really connects with them.
Okay. Now, what about fiction? I imagine imagination is pretty crucial there.
Of course. But it's not just about the plot or the characters. It's about imagining the whole world of the story. The details, the motivations, the themes.
It's like creating a whole new reality in your mind.
Yeah, and Hunt emphasizes that the best writing, no matter the genre, comes from this place of imaginative empathy.
Imaginative empathy. I
Yeah.
like that. So it's about connecting with your readers, but also with your characters, even if they're fictional.
Exactly. That connection is what makes the writing powerful.
All right. Now let's talk about a more specific technique, the rule of three.
Oh, yeah. This was really interesting. Hunt had so many examples of this.
It was almost a little spooky how many examples she found.
Right. Like everywhere you look, the rule of three pops up.
Okay, so remind us, what is the rule of three?
Basically, it's this idea that things are often more satisfying or memorable when presented in threes.
Okay, so like the three little pigs.
Exactly. Or think about Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
She had three companions
Right. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion.
and three acts in a play.
Yeah, or the three primary colors. It's everywhere.
It really is. But how does this apply to writing specifically?
Well, Hunt uses it to talk about plot structure. She says that a lot of great stories have three main elements.
Okay, like what?
You have the protagonist, the main character. Then you have a significant relationship, like a love interest or a best friend. And finally, you have an opposing force.
The antagonist. The bad guy.
Not necessarily a bad guy, she says. It could just be something that's standing in the way of the protagonist's goal.
Okay, I see. An obstacle to overcome.
Exactly. And she uses examples like The Wizard of Oz again and The Sound of Music.
Okay, so Dorothy facing those three witches.
And Maria struggling to fit in with the Von Trapp family, facing opposition from the captain, and ultimately fleeing the Nazis. Three big challenges.
Wow, you're right. It fits perfectly. But wait, is the rule of three only about plot structure?
Nope. Hunt says it also applies to the actual writing, like individual sentences and paragraphs.
Rightly. Give me an example.
Okay, so she mentions this example from Stein on Writing, where a character does three specific things, and then there are three potential questions posed to the reader.
Three actions, three questions. I see what you mean.
Yeah, so it creates a rhythm, a sense of completeness.
Okay, so it's not like I need to force everything into threes, right?
No, but it's something to keep in mind. Like, if you're outlining a scene or crafting a sentence, think about how the rule of three could make it more impactful.
Handy little trick.
Yeah.
All right, now let's get to the big question.
Mm.
What does Angela Hunt say is good writing?
Ah, the eternal quest. And she breaks it down really nicely. She says it's all about two things, technique and content.
Okay, so what makes for good content, especially in nonfiction?
Hunt says it should be unique, so offer something new, something that people haven't read a million times before.
Okay, originality.
Yeah, and it should be useful to the reader, applicable to their life or their work.
So practical value. Got it.
And ideally, it should motivate them to take some kind of action.
So inspire them to do something with the information.
Exactly. Now, for fiction, the good content is all about the story.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. But what makes a good story?
Hunt says it needs both a compelling plot and real emotional depth,
So it's not just about what happens, but how it makes the characters feel.
and how it makes the reader feel. That emotional connection is key.
All right, so that's content. Now what about technique?
Well, Hunt believes that good technique is all about writing with crispness, clarity, and precision.
So no rambling sentences.
Right. Use strong verbs, concrete nouns, avoid too many adjectives and adverbs.
Keep it clean and concise.
Exactly. And she also talks about exposition, like revealing information naturally without big, clunky info dumps.
Right, weave it into the story organically.
Yes. And especially in fiction, maintaining a clear point of view is crucial.
So the reader knows whose head they're in?
Right. And she makes this great analogy. Good technique is like a smooth highway.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it allows a story to flow effortlessly without bumps or distractions.
So the writing shouldn't get in the way of the story.
Exactly. The writing should serve the story and not the other way around.
Okay, now Hunt also talks about something that's kind of a sensitive topic for some writers, and that's the role of a message in fiction.
Oh, yeah. Especially for writers with a Christian worldview, like Hunt herself.
Right. So what's her take on that?
Well, she believes that for Christian novelists, the message should be primary.
So the writing should serve the message, not the other way around.
Yeah, she sees it as a way to share her faith through storytelling. But she also acknowledges that all novels, whether intentionally or not, have some kind of message or theme.
Like a deeper meaning beyond the surface plot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she argues that good writers, regardless of their beliefs, aim to satisfy their readers' desires.
So give the readers what they want.
Yeah, whether it's entertainment, knowledge, emotional catharsis, or something else entirely.
Makes sense. Now, Hunt also addresses some common challenges that writers face. Like, what if you come up with a book idea and then find out someone else has already written something similar?
Oh, yeah, that's a real fear for a lot of writers.
What does Hunt say about that?
Her advice is super encouraging. She says, do it anyway.
Really? Even if it's been done before?
She uses the example of Romeo and Juliet.
A timeless classic. But hasn't that story been told 1,000 times?
Exactly. And yet we still have new adaptations like West Side Story that feel fresh and original.
So it's not about the idea itself, but how you tell it.
Right. The unique voice, the specific details, the individual spin you put on it.
Okay, that's really good to hear, especially for new writers who might feel discouraged.
It's all about finding your own way to tell the story. Now, another challenge Hunt talks about is the use of profanity in writing.
Ah, yes, the blue word section. That's a tricky one,
Yeah, some writers feel like it's necessary for realism.
but others find it off-putting.
Exactly. And Hunt kind of walks that line. She mentions Jerry Seinfeld, who famously built his comedy without using strong language.
And it worked pretty well for him.
Right. And Hunt's point is that dialogue in fiction is already a heightened version of real speech.
So we don't need to include every word that people might say in real life.
Right. And she gives an example from her own novel, The Truth Teller. One of her characters is morally corrupt but very sophisticated, so he avoids profanity.
So she's saying that you can convey a character's personality and emotions without resorting to strong language.
Exactly. It's about being deliberate with your word choices and considering how they might impact the reader's experience.
Okay, so think about the overall tone and atmosphere you want to create.
Right. And maintain that fictive dream, that sense of being fully immersed in the story.
Now, Hunt also shares a really interesting technique for adding emotional depth to your writing. The secret snapshot.
Oh, yeah. This one is powerful.
Okay, tell us about it.
So it's a technique she learned from editor Saul Stein. The idea is to tap into a deeply personal, maybe even painful memory from your own life.
Okay, so like a snapshot of a moment that holds strong emotions.
Right. And then you use those emotions to inform how your characters feel in similar situations.
So it's not about writing about yourself directly, but about channeling those real raw emotions into your characters.
Exactly. And Hunt shares a very personal example. She struggled with infertility, and she used those feelings of grief and longing when writing about a character who was also facing infertility.
Wow, that must have been incredibly difficult, but also very effective.
Yeah, her editor actually praised her for how realistically she portrayed those emotions.
So it's about going beyond just stating an emotion, like Sarah was sad.
Yeah.
It's about showing that sadness through actions and reactions that feel genuine.
Right. It's about tapping into the universality of human experience.
All right, now let's talk about the writing and editing process. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, right?
Absolutely. And Hunt has some great advice on that, too.
So what's her big takeaway?
Well, she stresses the importance of moving forward while writing. Don't get bogged down in editing too early.
So just get the story down first.
Yeah, she quotes Susan Bell, who says that too much polishing in the early stages can lead to beautifully written sentences that don't actually serve the story.
So don't get too attached to those early drafts.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to editing, Hunt emphasizes the need to gain some distance from your work first.
So take a break, let it sit for a while.
Yeah, and then come back with fresh eyes. And she has a really interesting technique for this.
What's that?
She has her computer read the manuscript aloud.
Really? Why did she do that?
She says it helps her identify awkward phrasing, repetitive words, and things like that.
Oh, interesting. So it's like hearing it from a different perspective.
Exactly. And she also finds it helpful to view the manuscript in a formatted book layout.
Like how it would actually look in print.
Yeah, she says it can reveal things you might miss when it's just in a Word document.
That's a great tip. Okay, finally, let's talk about genre. Why is it so important for writers to understand genre and often to write within a specific genre?
Well, Hunt explains that it's mainly for practical reasons. Like, bookstores organize their shelves by genre.
Right, so readers can easily find what they're looking for.
And publishers categorize their books by genre, too. So if you have a book that doesn't fit neatly into a category...
It's harder to market.
Exactly. It can get lost in the shuffle.
Okay, so genre is about helping readers and publishers find your book.
Right. Now, Hunt's advice is to choose a genre that you enjoy reading.
Makes sense. Write what you love.
And then, she says, become a student of that genre.
So really understand the conventions, the tropes, the expectations.
Exactly. Like, what tense is typically used, what point of view, what are the common themes and character types.
She uses chick lit as an example.
Right, yeah. It has a very specific set of characteristics.
Yeah.
And she warns against deliberately violating those genre conventions.
Especially if you're a new writer trying to break in.
Right. Now, what if you want to switch genres or blend genres?
Is that even possible?
Hunt says it is, but it's usually easier once you've established yourself in one genre first.
So build a readership and then experiment.
She mentions Donald Mass, who says it usually takes at least 5 books in a genre to really become established.
5 books, wow.
And she also talks about Nora Roberts, who uses a pen name, J.D. Robb, to write romantic suspense.
So she can appeal to different audiences without confusing her existing fans.
Exactly. And she even suggests that male writers might consider writing romance under a pen name.
Really? Why is that?
Well, romance is a huge market, and sometimes publishers are more open to female authors in that genre.
Oh, interesting. So a pen name could be a way to break in.
And of course, she reminds us that nonfiction has genres too,
Right, like memoirs, biographies, self-help, and so on.
each with their own set of conventions. And she ends this section with a question for you, the listener.
What's that?
What's your favorite genre to read? And what genre do you want to write?
Great questions to consider. All right, well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into Angela Hunt's Write Well newsletter.
Yeah.
So much great advice for writers at all levels.
I completely agree. From understanding the nuances of language to navigating the complexities of copyright to mastering specific writing techniques and understanding the marketplace, this newsletter is a treasure trove of wisdom.
And it's all coming from someone who has written over 165 books.
She's definitely been there and done that.
So, now that we've learned about the importance of genre, I have a question for you, the listener. What seemingly unconventional genre combination could actually find a dedicated readership if executed with skill and imagination? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time.